The book of Daniel was written when the Jews were going through a terrible time, when they were suffering great persecution as they were in exile in Babylon. They faced persecution and opposition from a pagan king. And this book of Daniel gives us the story of one person and what happened to him during that difficult time. And I'm reading Daniel chapter 6. Darius decided to appoint 120 governors to hold office throughout his empire. In addition, he chose Daniel and 2 others to supervise the governors and to look after the king's interests. Daniel soon showed that he could do better work than the other supervisors or the governors. Because he was so outstanding, the king considered putting him in charge of the whole empire. Then the other supervisors and the governors tried to find something wrong with the way Daniel administered the empire. But they couldn't, because Daniel was reliable and did not do anything wrong or dishonest. They said to one another, "We are not going to find anything of which to accuse Daniel, unless it is something in connection with his religion." So they went to see the king and said, "King Darius, may your majesty live forever. All of us who administer your empire, the supervisors, the governors, the lieutenant governors, and the other officials, have agreed that your majesty should issue an order and enforce it strictly. Give orders that for 30 days no one be permitted to request anything from any god or from any man except from your majesty. Anyone who violates this order is to be thrown into a pit filled with lions. So let your majesty issue this order and sign it, and it will be enforced, a law of the Medes and Persians which cannot be changed." And so King Darius signed the order. When Daniel learnt that the order had been signed, he went home. In an upstairs room of his house, there were windows that faced towards Jerusalem. There, just as he had always done, he knelt down at the open windows and prayed to God 3 times a day. When Daniel's enemies observed him praying to God, all of them went together to the king to accuse Daniel. They said, "Your Majesty, you signed an order that for the next 30 days, anyone who requested anything from any god or from any man except you would be thrown into a pit filled with lions." The king replied, "Yes, a strict order, a law of the Medes and Persians which cannot be changed." Then they said to the king, "Daniel, one of the exiles from Judah, does not respect your majesty or obey the order you issued. He prays regularly 3 times a day." When the king heard this, he was upset and did his best to find some way to rescue Daniel. He kept trying until sunset. Then the men came back to the king and said to him, "Your majesty knows that according to the laws of the Medes and Persians, no order which the king issues can be changed." So the king gave orders for Daniel to be arrested, and he was thrown into the pit filled with lions. He said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve so loyally, rescue you." A stone was put over the mouth of the pit, and the king placed his own royal seal and the seal of his noblemen on the stone, so that no one could rescue Daniel. Then the king returned to the palace and spent a sleepless night without food or any form of entertainment. At dawn, the king got up and hurried to the pit. When he got there, he called out anxiously, "Daniel, servant of the living God, was the God you serve so loyally able to save you from the lions?" Daniel answered, "May your majesty live forever. God sent his angel to shut the mouths of the lions, so that they would not hurt me. He did this because he knew that I was innocent, and because I have not wronged you, your majesty." The king was overjoyed and gave orders for Daniel to be pulled up out of the pit. So they pulled him up and saw that he had not been hurt at all, for he trusted to God. Then King Darius wrote to the people of all nations, races, and languages on earth, "Greetings, I command that throughout my empire, everyone should fear and respect Daniel's God. He is a living God, and he will rule forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and his power will never come to an end. He saves and rescues. He performs wonders and miracles in heaven and on earth. He saved Daniel from being killed by the lions." Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Daniel was one of the select few. He was chosen from the Israelite exiles with other young men of noble blood from the royal family. He was chosen because he was one of those handsome, intelligent people, well trained, quick to learn, and free from physical defects, so that they would be qualified to serve in the royal court of the king in their exile. When people are away from home, they miss so many things from home. Life is different. They may be selected, they may have a good job, but often they miss home. When our son worked in Brussels a few years ago, just before he was due to return back to the UK to work, we found out that there was a little van that sold pasties in Brussels, Cornish pasties. And so just before he came home, he had a taste of Cornish home and bought a Cornish pasty around the corner from where he worked in Brussels. And many of us who have had people in our family who have emigrated, maybe ancestors years ago, in the times of deprivation and poverty, who emigrated to other parts of the world, began to make Cornish pasties so that places like Mexico, Australia, America, you can still go and buy a Cornish pasty. It may be more spicy or have a few differences from our own according to what they can buy, but we miss home. And some of us know what it's like to be in exile in different ways recently. This time of lockdown has seemed to be a time of exile, a time when many people have experienced ill health, bereavement, times when they have been unable to visit loved ones in care homes or hospitals, times when they haven't been able to be with their loved ones in their last hours. People have experienced great money worries and still are experiencing them. We have had times when we can't worship, and even when we are able to come to worship, many of us have mourned that we have been unable to physically sing. But there are other things that make us feel that we live in a time of exile, not just the last 16 months or so of lockdown. There seems to be a feeling that when we think about it, that the moral compass in our country has altered, that there is a disregard now for many things that we took for granted, a disregard even for infidelity. Apparently the Bishop of Manchester said that he was more worried about Matthew Hancock breaking the COVID rules than him having, and these are his words, a bit of a fling. These may be difficult times. We are not wanting to cast stones or say that we are perfect, I don't mean that. But standards that we took for granted and aimed for and hoped that other people would aim for as well, in many ways, in the way they conduct themselves in public and in private, suddenly seem to be being eroded. These are difficult times, and so we can understand a little of how the people felt when they were in exile in Babylon, away from their homeland, away from all the things they were used to, and away from Jerusalem and the temple, the centre of their worship. But Jeremiah had said to them that this is what God says to you. He said to them, "This is what God is saying. Build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat what you grow in them. Marry and have children. Then let your children get married so that they also may have children. Work for the good of the cities where I have made you go as prisoners. Pray to me on their behalf, because if they are prosperous, you will be prosperous too." God was urging them, as I'm sure he is urging us, no matter how difficult or challenging the times we find ourselves in, to continue to be faithful to him, to be honourable, to do everything properly, to be reliable and trustworthy, to show God in the midst of whatever difficult places we may find ourselves. And Daniel seems to be the ultimate example of how to behave in the most difficult of circumstances. We see Daniel and his posture, the whole way he conducted himself in exile. He would never cross the line and compromise. He didn't just do what other people wanted him to do to enable him to fit in. Although his name was changed in exile, he was still the same person. He was still recognised for being trustworthy, for embracing new challenges. He was reliable, and he never did anything wrong or disobedient. He even let this enter what he would eat, this whole way, his whole demeanour. He decided he would not let himself become ritually unclean by eating the food or drinking the wine of the royal court. And so he said to the king, "Test us for 10 days, give us vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare us with the young men who are eating the food of the royal court, and base your decision on how we look." And so the king agreed to let him try his own diet for 10 days. And after the 10 days were up, they looked healthier and stronger than those who had been eating the royal food. They wouldn't do anything to compromise their allegiance to God, even in exile. In fact, Daniel showed that he could do better work than the other supervisors or the governors. Instead of moaning and groaning about his lot, it seemed to bring out the best in Daniel. He showed how excellent he was. And the king could see how outstanding he was and put him in charge of the whole empire. There are so many things that we may mourn about our life today. I've been reading the little stories that I wrote when I was a child in the 60s at Beacon School. And it's like an era. It's not written through rose-coloured spectacles. It's what a little girl wrote every day in her book at school. The drawings are terrible. I never could draw. And there may be spelling mistakes. But it seems like a world away from today, where I talk of going to Sunday school, of having friends to play. There's one strange comment which made me smile when I read it last night, of how I went to a tea treat and I had some toffees and some Capstan cigarettes. Now, actually, I think they were those little sweet cigarettes that you could buy, but anyone reading that would think that I had very liberal parents who were letting me smoke when I was 6. But when I read those stories and just think of that life, punctuated always by Sunday school and chapel and tea treats and practices for Sunday school anniversary. And I think of some of the pressures that our children and families face today. It makes me very nostalgic. Often we mourn the fact that our Sundays are so different from the ones that we enjoyed in our childhood. And I don't know about you, but sometimes people complain. But for me, Sundays were always the best day of the week. As an only child, I loved going to Sunday school twice, going to 2 services. I loved it all. I enjoyed every minute of it, going out for walks with my mum and dad, special Sunday teas. Sundays were always the highlight of my week. I really enjoyed them. But we may complain, as we may feel that we are exiled in a land that no longer keeps Sundays special. But there's nothing to stop us keeping Sundays special. We don't have to impose or be awkward or difficult, but we can make our Sundays special. And I don't know about you, but how glad I was in lockdown when we had so many things put on for us to enable us to keep Sundays special. To enable us to worship God. We may have been far apart. Initially we could listen to services on television, on the radio, on YouTube, and then latterly when we could join together on Zoom. And we could feel that fellowship. As well as worshipping God, we could feel the fellowship with our brothers and sisters as we gathered together. And I think again, Sundays became the best day of the week for me during lockdown. A special day, a day set apart. And although we are surrounded by so many things that we find difficult, we find unhelpful, things that we even may think are evil, we're encouraged to be like Daniel, to open our windows to Jerusalem. For us it will be metaphorically, to open our eyes to the goodness, to open our eyes to Jesus Christ, to open our windows to let Jesus, to let our Lord God into our lives. In Philippians we read, "In conclusion, my friends, fill your minds with those things that are good and that deserve praise, things that are true, noble, right, pure, lovely and honourable. Put into practice what you learned and received from me, both from my words and from my actions, and the God who gives us peace will be with you." And so Daniel opened his window to Jerusalem. He continued to worship his holy God. He didn't alter his behaviour. And as he opened his window, he put into practice that he would pray 3 times a day with his window open. Even after the king signed his decree, he went home, and in an upstairs room of his house where the windows faced Jerusalem, he opened them, and as he always did, he knelt down at the open windows and he prayed to God 3 times a day. I don't know what you think you would have done, or what you would have done if we faced such an order today. If I'm honest, I think maybe I would continue to pray, but I would close the windows, draw the curtains, and hide away and hope that no one heard me. You may remember a few years ago we had a lovely Tongan family who worshipped with us at Wesley Rock. Ice and Tima and their 4 little children. And they were a great joy to be with us. Their exuberance and their faith were an encouragement to all of us. And one sunny evening, I walked down towards their house, and they lived in a little terrace house in Main Street just above the chapel. 6 of them in this tiny 2-bedroomed house with just a little backyard. And as I walked down the street, their windows were open. It was a hot, sunny day. And I could hear from inside, Ice and a friend. And they were praying with their windows open. A Tongan friend who was visiting Penzance had met up with them. They always supported each other wherever they went. If someone from Tonga came, they always came and shared together. They always had hospitality for them, even in their tiny house, with money often short. And they were praying together, and I never understood any Tongan at all. But I could understand that they were praying the Lord's Prayer. You could just pick up that lilt. They were there with their windows open, surrounded with the people going to and fro to the shop, all their neighbours, praying. And I always felt what a wonderful witness that was, that they were praying. They were in a strange land away from home. English was not their first language, but when they got together, they prayed with their windows literally open. One of the things that I said about was that during the pandemic we were able to have Zoom worship. And last Sunday evening we were on our way home from visiting John in London, and we stayed in a bed and breakfast. And we were able to join the Zoom worship with Reverend Edwin Myers from St Ives. And so we were in this farmhouse, and we had the windows wide open because it was boiling hot last Sunday night. And on Zoom you can join in and sing. And I remember thinking, I wonder if anyone outside or coming up the landing can hear us singing as we join together in worship. I wasn't frightened, but I thought, I wonder what people will think of us. How worried we are sometimes what people will think of us. Even though we may feel we are committed Christians, we can still have that nagging doubt, that niggling feeling, what will people think of us? Daniel was braver and stronger than I am. He didn't worry what people thought of him, but he continued to pray with his windows open. During the Euros, one of the things that has come out so clearly is the Christian faith of some of those young men. We have heard of Marcus Rashford and Raheem Sterling and Saka, and of their Christian faith, of how Saka regularly attended a Pentecostal church until he moved to Arsenal, and how when he won the Young London Player of the Year award, he tweeted God's work, crediting God for where his starring performance lay. And they're beginning to say in the media, in the secular media, that a transformation has begun to take place in sport, with an influx of devout football players from overseas. Now signs of the cross on the pitch or hands raised in prayer before games are becoming commonplace. They say there's a lot more faith, there's a lot more Christians. And many of those people who are bringing faith into the sports field are people who have their roots in the Windrush generation. That generation of people 70 years ago who came to our country, and as well as bringing their hopes and dreams, they brought their Christian faith. For many of those people, they may have find that their time in Britain has been a time of exile. Some of the values that they held dear in their homeland, some of their distinctive worship that they held so dear, they may have missed so much and have felt so much in exile. But some of those people have remained devout. They have remained constant. They have shown that their faith in God is not just a ritual, but in how they behave. In a strange land where they often were unwelcome, even sadly in our churches, they have held on to their faith. They have shown that their faith is a massive part of their lives. Their Christian presence is winning the country's hearts. We may be so sad that penalties were missed, but how much more important that they are sharing their Christian faith with people who would probably never come into contact with our churches, hear any of our sermons, hear any of our YouTube services, but they will listen and watch those young black Christian footballers who have been so humble and so honest about their faith. And so we need to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus. We need to keep our windows open. We think of people in other lands who actually face charges of blasphemy or persecution. Of Asia Bibi, who was accused of blasphemy, accused of speaking out against the Prophet Muhammad, and how initially she was sentenced to hang because she was a Christian. Eventually, she was released, and she is now calling on Christians to unite and stand for those who suffer persecution. All these people who stand firm in the face of persecution, who keep their windows open to Jerusalem, not only keep their faith, but they share their faith. Because King Darius, after having seen and heard what Daniel had done, wrote to the people of all nations, races and languages, and he said, "Greetings, I command that throughout my empire, everyone should fear and respect Daniel's God. He is a living God, and he will rule forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and his power will never come to an end. He saves and rescues. He performs wonders and miracles in heaven and on earth. He saved Daniel from being killed by the lions." And so I pray that we will look to God, whatever happens, whatever places we may go through, that God will give us the strength to keep our windows open towards Jerusalem. Amen.